everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Endless Spiral podcast. You're all very welcome. This is, in fact, episode 1 of series 3. So I'm delighted to be back for another series. The first 2 series have gone really, really well. So I'm delighted to be back. On this episode, I am joined by Irish freediving record holder Claire Walsh. Claire has represented Ireland at the freediving world championships, and she can actually hold her breath for just under 6 minutes. And I know that's a bit of literally just under 6 minutes. So we'll have a chat about that with Claire, because I know that's probably a bit of a sticking point with her. On this episode, we'll also be chatting about breathing techniques and how they can kind of improve your wellness and enhance performance, and they can relieve stress and anxiety. And we'll also have a chat about Claire and her bit of a life story and stuff like that. So Claire, that's enough of me yapping for now. How are you?
I'm great. Delighted to be on.
Yeah. So I'm actually delighted to have you on, because I think I saw you on Jason Byrne's Mind Your Love. So, and apart from him answering the phone halfway through the interview, it actually went really, really well. So
I just that moment of going, whose phone is? No, it's hardly. Oh, it's Jason's.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and he's answering it. Oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Just like only Jason could get away with that. It was just brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant.
And he didn't even cut it out. He left it in. I know it was live at the time, but he left it in afterwards.
A bit of it. He's some man.
Oh Jesus, yeah, he's gas. But anyway, listen, this is my podcast. We're not talking about him. Right, I've lost my train of thought. Let's go. So, as I mentioned in the intro, you're an Irish record holder for free diving, but we'll get into the breathing techniques and stuff like that in a little while. But do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, just in case they're not too sure about you, because you've quite an interesting story and stuff like that?
So my name's obviously Claire Walsh. I free dive, I sing, I swim. And it's funny, it is interesting describing myself as a free diver at the moment. I have, obviously I'm in Ireland. I have no plans as of yet to go traveling, but certainly free diving impacts my life even when I'm at home and I'm dry, as we would say. It's probably not the most coherent introduction.
We'll make something up, it's fine.
My life is made up of water, mainly, whether that's, sometimes walking by the sea during COVID times, or daily dips, or when things get really good, going underneath.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit, if you don't mind, because I noticed, and I was reading kind of a few interviews you did before, and you obviously changed careers a few years back. And the reason why I find that so interesting, because I actually changed careers myself, and I found changing career, like, obviously in the long run, it has been beneficial and the right decision. But at the time, for me anyway, it caused me a huge amount of anxiety, and I didn't really cope too well with it. But you changed, and similar to myself, you went in a completely different direction than what you were doing in the first place. So do you want to kind of just tell a little bit how that came about, and what kind of attracted you to freediving and stuff like that?
Actually, I've changed careers, a number of times. I am a little bit of a phoenix. There's definitely a reinvention every couple of years. So my background is in theatre. So I studied drama performance with DIT, Dublin Conservatory of Music and Drama, in North Mines. I really, really enjoyed that. And then I went to London to do an MA in a master's in movement. And when I finished that, I kind of thought, that should have been when I, attacked the theatre scene with gusto. But I'd already had enough of it. I didn't have the mental energy or resilience, I think, to do the creative work is the fun part. It's the marketing and the putting yourself out there that I probably didn't have the stomach for at the time. So I worked in a bank for a year and a bit, maybe a little bit longer actually. And then I think kind of late 20s, I started working for myself. I taught drama, I taught movement. I started running a gospel choir. And the next, then I started working as a puppeteer. So the next couple of years, like maybe 8 years, were my work was made up of varying degrees of that. So working in theatre, sometimes I was directing, sometimes I was creating, or else I was teaching. And then in 2015, I went off, I just went traveling. I found freediving, I loved it, but I came home and was back in the theatre. And then 2017, I jacked it all in and I went away for the year to do my instructor course in freediving. And then since then, it's kind of been a jumble of all those things. So obviously freediving, it has a much bigger part in my life now. And just before COVID hit, the idea was that I would work here in Ireland half the year, whether it's doing breathing workshops, speaking events, and then the other half of the year I'd be away training. So I kind of started putting things in place to have that sort of lifestyle. And then sure, COVID hit, and here we are now. And you know, I really, really hope that freediving will be a big part of my year in 2022. So you know, that balance will have to be try to hit that balance again. But the moment I'm actually doing a bit of writing.
Wow.
So yeah, things have changed and evolved quite a lot. And I think, you know, you mentioned anxiety around changing. You know, that's something, I don't know necessarily whether it's anxiety, but there'll be a huge level of imposter syndrome. And a mantra I repeat to myself, in fact, I texted it to someone yesterday, and the mantra is, I have the right to change lanes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, I think I get very stuck about, no, I'm a whatever. So I'm a puppeteer, and you know, I need to learn everything I can about puppeteering to be considered a puppeteer. Okay, now I'm a drama teacher. I need to learn, you know, you need to kind of validate that. So when you're kind of moving in and out of things, you know, your confidence can be kind of fluid.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of my mantra, and it's only a recent one. It's like, you know, I have the right to change lanes, and if I don't like this lane, right, I'll move back. You know, no big deal. It gives me permission to try things. Play is kind of the word I often use, and see how they go.
Yeah, and the puppeteer part, what exactly was that? I mean, was that on stage or?
Yeah. So I worked in a puppet theatre called Lambert Puppet Theatre. So for any of your listeners who were born in the 70s or 80s, they might be familiar with Lambert's. So Lambert's would have been responsible for the TV show Wanderly Wagon, which was on in the 70s.
I used to love that.
Yeah, and then for, I think, my generation, it's the Bosco era.
The Bosco era, yeah.
Yeah, the Lambert family have had a puppet theatre that opened up, I think it was in the 60s, probably getting that date wrong, in the 60s, and they ran shows out of there for years and years and years. Like, I went to it as a kid. I went to the Christmas show, you know, when I was 4 or 5, so early 80s, mid 80s, and then whatever 2000 and whatever year it was, I was back there working at it. Wow, so there was a huge nostalgia factor. It was quite incredible to work there and see families come, like grandmothers who'd brought their children, and those children are bringing their children. It was quite an incredible place to work.
Yeah. I used to love Bosco. I used to love coming home from school and watching Bosco. I think you're the same age as me, and I used to love watching Bosco. It was gas.
Oh yeah. Oh, I met Bosco in real life. It was my ultimate fangirl moment.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
When Bosco said my name, I was so freaked out.
Yeah. What was he like? Did he have a bit of an ego? You know, he was a bit of a star.
Yeah, he's a she.
Was it?
Well, she is neither, actually. But the person behind Bosco is a she.
Oh, okay, right. I didn't realize.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun hearing Bosco saying your name and talking to you. I was so freaked out.
That's amazing.
It was something I don't think I'll ever forget.
Yeah, that's the basic.
The Irish childhood memory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And what attracted you to freediving? I mean, you must have given it a try or on holidays or something, was it? Like,
Yeah.
it's not
So when I
some.
was backpacking, I kind of had the attitude of just trying things. Zip lining, I did paragliding, and then snorkeling, scuba diving. So free diving kind of just was one of those things towards the end of the trip. But once I did that, I was kind of stuck on it.
Yeah,
Like that, I did think it was one of those activities that you would just do on holidays, and when you came home, you'd let go of it, but that didn't happen. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do it while I was here. I wanted to go back out and train. I wanted to learn more about it. So kind of the following year, I went out and spent a summer on an island just off Honduras, learning more about it. And then the following year, which is 2017, I spent the full year there.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and since then, kind of, I don't go on holidays anymore. I go to Egypt for a couple of months and I train. Yeah, holidays seem so random at this stage.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
And
it's
there's
always
two.
basically structured around training.
Yeah, okay, right, get you. But and there's two different types of free diving, isn't it? You do the two different disciplines, is it?
Oh, there's loads of disciplines.
Oh, okay,
So there's pool freediving, which is measured in time or distance, and then there's depth, which is measured in depth, and then within those categories, there's disciplines within that.
okay,
So depth is divided into 4 categories. So the first one is free immersion, that's pulling down on a rope. The second one is constant weight bifins. So we wear these long fins and it's kicking down. The next one is constant weight monofin, or just constant weight, it would be known as. And that's a really beautiful one to watch. So it's one fin, a monofin, and it's like it's a dolphin kick. And it's so incredible to watch. It's just like human mermaids.
wow,
It's really spectacular. And then the last one is called constant no fins. And that one is pretty much what it says in the tin, no fins. And it's a variation on a breaststroke.
okay.
That's definitely the most challenging one, mentally and physically.
Yeah, yeah, okay, get you. And which you set the Irish record for? Which one was that? Was that for the one with the rope? Was it?
So free immersion, yeah, I think I still hold that one. I did set one for no fins that was recently taken by another diver, and then bifins. Yeah, I set bifins and constant weight as well.
Okay, wow, brilliant, amazing. And let's address the elephant in the room. 6 minutes or under 6 minutes.
Yeah,
What
yeah, and
happened?
it's funny because the depth, my deepest dive is 59 meters. So clearly,
Yeah.
my psyche has something with the number 6. 2020 was supposed to be the year that all changed, but look, it's been
Yeah.
pushed out a year or two, and that's no problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't seem to get past the 6.
Yeah. So it was 5:59, wasn't it?
5:59 every time, every flipping
And it
time.
probably makes you feel great when people keep mentioning it to you as well.
It's gas, and it's just funny because the 59 is the number in depth, and the thing is, I won't go like so in depth when I build back up, and I'm aiming to peak and to beat that PB. I won't aim for 60. I'll be aiming for 61 or 62,
Yeah.
because I think with the round numbers, 60 is always just so much bigger mentally. So yeah, we'll push it to 61, 62.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
if we had this interview a year later, it would be up 68, 69. So yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably be 1 second short of another number.
Exactly. Oh, look, it keeps me humble.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And so I was listening to a podcast you did before, and it was actually a very interesting conversation you were having, because it was about kind of the negative thought. So say you're preparing to do a dive,
Yeah.
and you've got like negative thoughts in your head and all that, because obviously it's quite a dangerous sport. But you had one story where you blacked out as you were about to do, was it in the World Championships or something? I thought that was a really interesting story, kind of how, you build yourself up to do it, and then you're kind of dealing with your thoughts, and even the negative thoughts and I suppose anxiety as you even before you go down, but even going down, and then you blacked out kind of on the surface, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that was my first dive, my no fins of the World Championships 2019. And, you know, whilst it certainly wasn't a pleasant experience, I've learned so much from that one dive. Yeah, it really showed me the power of thoughts. It was a diver, a safety diver, got out of the water afterwards, and just he came in and checked on me. He said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Yeah, grand." Ego a bit on the floor. And he said, "Were you nervous?" And I said, I don't think I was. I didn't feel nervous, but at the time I definitely felt quite emotional." And he said, "You forget that the organ in our body that consumes the most oxygen is our brain."
Yeah.
So again, so it's nearly 2 years later, and that sentence has really stuck with me. So the power of our thought, the power of you know, what our thoughts can do in our bodies and our physical functions. So in that case, my thoughts, whether they were negative or positive, they were churning out. My brain was churning out thoughts, which was in turn using up my oxygen, which on that day tipped me over the edge between having enough oxygen to finish my dive and then not enough so that I had to black out. And that was the difference. I didn't do anything particularly differently. So that's something that I try to be aware of. And the comparison that I have at the moment is I have long COVID. So I'm really conscious about energy. I do suffer with fatigue. It's probably my most predominant symptom. And I'm using a watch that tells you your body battery for the day. So it gives you a number from 1 to 100. And I was with my trainer this morning, and I was saying how my battery just comes down so quickly throughout the day. Even if I'm just lying down, kind of resting or napping is a big part of my day. But he did say, what are the stress levels? I'm like, oh, they're not too bad, not too bad. And, kind of at the moment I'm seeing comparisons. So why I mightn't necessarily feel stressed. There's definitely a lot going on, no pun intended, below the surface, that is chewing up oxygen, using energy and therefore draining the resources I have. And so, okay, the difference is now I get to stay conscious. But certainly there's something there for me to look at in terms of quietening thoughts, finding more moments of rest. And when I say rest, I don't mean, I'm pointing over to my couch at the moment. I don't mean lying on my couch. I mean really focusing in on my breath, quietening my thoughts, and switching from the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system. So really letting my body go into that mode of rest and digest, as opposed to fight or flight.
Yeah, I had that written down, and that's actually the perfect link for the breathing technique. So I suppose let's have a chat about that, because you've already started it. So I actually had that written down, like I think I'm actually taking words off from what you said before, kind of grounding yourself in the fight or flight, which is what you've said. So I mean, obviously, excuse me, as we mentioned in the intro, it can improve performance and wellness, and obviously relieve stress and anxiety. So even if you're not training for something, I suppose, would you kind of use your breathing techniques anyway, if you're, just for everyday life? Is that something you would do a lot of the time, or is it?
Yeah and no. Yes, and I do, and I remember, and no, and I should be doing it a lot more. I think I was more aware of it before I had COVID. And at the moment there is a slight I suppose lack of trust with my breath, because it's taken a huge hit since. But you mentioned training for something, or dealing with anxiety. I think for anyone living, it's something that we could be more aware of and utilize a lot more. And I probably need to pay attention to those words more than anything. But like, especially, how often do you find yourself without your phone in your hand? Not scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media platform you're on, headlines, all these bits of information that we're taking in like all the time throughout the day.
Yeah.
They're triggering like a small level of stress. It might be anything particularly heightened, but they're keeping us, locked into this. I suppose it's a cumulative effect,
Yeah.
little bits every day, every hour, and that's keeping us caught in this fight or flight with that hum of stress, never too far below the surface. So, and I might be putting it into the best words, but I think people will be far more familiar with the scenario of being really tired, being really drained, dying for their bed that night. And they get into bed and the head hits the pillow and the eyes shoot wide awake because the mind starts going.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's just showing that throughout the day we have been humming and buzzing or whatever, and maybe even low energy. But then when we get into bed, the mind won't turn off because it can't. It hasn't been given those tools to just slow down.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a manifestation of that, or what that might look like. So for me, and I still do it, to be fair, I do it particularly a lot before I go to sleep. I do breathing exercise. I use a really nice app called Budify.
Okay.
And it's a super one. I've been using this for years. I know there are other good ones. Headspace is another one. Calm.
Calm is the one that I use. Yeah.
Yeah, I've used Budify for about 10 years now.
Okay, I'll check that out.
And it just has a little pie chart, and you pick the situations, and usually it's going to sleep or having trouble sleeping. And then that opens up further into little meditations that you can do, that some are like 9 minutes, some are 2. So there's a good variety.
Yeah.
And then use that, put them on, and then use that time just to focus on my breath and have someone kind of guiding me a little bit. So I found that really, really helpful.
Okay, because that's something that I struggle with, is going to sleep at night. I mean, once I go to sleep, I'm fine. But what I've been doing for a long time, and it's probably not the best thing to be doing, but I end up having to put my earphones in going to sleep, and I listen to music or a podcast or whatever it is, and it stops my mind racing. So I suppose I'm focusing on maybe the words I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it helps me, because if I don't put and I've probably got just into a habit of it now, but if I don't have my earphones in, I find it very difficult to sleep, because my mind, as you said a few minutes, my mind is constantly racing, and it's obviously from, because I'm in front of a screen all day, so my mind is constantly just churning out thought after thought, and a lot of the time they're negative thoughts as well, because I suffer quite badly with anxiety. So, I find it very difficult to fall asleep. So I suppose what I'm saying is, do you try and is it slowing your breath down, or is it just a certain rhythm you're supposed to have, or
a number of it's a number of things. I think the best way to start is just creating an awareness. Right. So being aware of maybe what part of your body moves when you breathe. Do you breathe through your mouth or through your nose? So what I will notice is that when I'm breathing, if I'm stressed, my breathing is short, it's shallow. The top part of my chest is moving a lot more. So what I will then do is put my hands on my tummy and try and coax my breath just a little bit deeper down into my belly, slowing it down. And then it's usually, once I catch that, it's usually quite easy for me. It's easy for me because I free dive, and how you breathe before a dive is all about slowing the breath down. It's about slowing thoughts down. That's a really big part of diving prep. Heart rate, everything is, it's called the relaxation phase. Like, that's the aim of our preparation. So it's quite easy for me to switch into it once I catch it. Right. And that's the difficult part sometimes. So there are so many techniques, and it's terrific. Breath work is now quite a familiar term to people. Yeah. And there are lots of practitioners out there teaching courses and teaching different methods. But the great thing is, it is accessible to everyone. We're all living, we're all breathing. So what I will say to someone who might be a little bit too overwhelmed to go into any sort of depth of breath work, I would advise them to sit on the floor with maybe their back to the wall. So I like to feel support, or even if they are feeling overwhelmed, feeling a cold surface against you. So it's something that just grounds you.
Okay.
So bum on the floor, back to wall or in your chair. Take your hands, put them lower down in your belly, so just underneath your belly button. And try and disengage the top part of your body. So try and relax the chest, the shoulders, the neck, the jaw. Trying to take them out of the equation and just focus on slowing down the breath. And when you inhale, feeling your belly expand with that. I often use music.
Yeah.
So pick a song that has a positive connotation for me, positive anchor, pop it on. It's usually whatever 3-4 minutes long, and that's it. So it's just 3 or 4 minutes of my focus coming back to my breath. And like anything, my mind wanders, and I wonder what I'll have for breakfast, or I wonder if I've left the tap running, or whatever level of anxiety I'm working from that day. My
Yeah.
mind does wander, but I just come back to that feeling of breathing in for 4 and out for 8. In for 4, out for 8. I
Okay.
usually use a ratio of 1 to 2. So if I breathe in for 4, it's out for 8. If I breathe in for 3, it's out for 6. That's what I know works for me. It's usually 4 to 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
And use the counts. And use those things, kind of like you said, you're listening to music to help
Yeah.
decompress, and it's a hook for something to do, and that counting and the sound of the breathing is something that just stops the mind going too far either way down the rabbit hole.
Okay. Okay. So when you said did you say in for 8? No, out for 8 and in for 4. So what you said?
Yeah. In
Yeah.
for out.
Yeah, because I was practicing one, and it sounds very similar. What maybe it was the same. So it was in for 4, then there was a
Yeah.
pause for 4. So hold your breath for 4,
Yeah.
and then it was out for 4. Is that something different, or is that just a different
Yeah.
version?
So you're kind of starting to describe called box breathing. So that's
Oh,
in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, in for 4.
yeah.
So I'm drawing a square because that's usually how you keep track. It's
Oh, okay.
creating the sense of a box.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
another technique, and that's really, really useful. There is another one called 4-7-8. So that's in for 4, hold for 7, and out for 8.
Okay. That probably take a bit of practice, would it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of these things take a little bit of practice. And it's kind of funny, because if you think about it, we breathe, whatever, I think the number is 22,000 times a day. And you've been doing that for how many days of years? So if you begin to change those habits, it can feel different.
Yeah.
It can feel alien. So it does take time. It does take practice, but most of all, it does take patience. So, if someone were listening and decided they're going to give this a go, and they tried it and just went, oh no, that feels too weird. It's bound to feel weird. You're doing something totally different.
Yeah.
It does take patience, and there are lots of ways of doing it. So yeah, just be kind to yourself. This is an
Yeah.
opportunity for you, and those moments. So say it's 4 minutes in the morning with a really beautiful piece of music that calms you. What you're essentially doing is just creating a bit of space for yourself. That's the ultimate definition of self-care. It's
Yeah.
creating a space for you to focus on your wellness, to connect with your body, to check in with yourself. And that is essentially self-care.
Yeah. And you can do it, I suppose, as you said, you can do it in the morning, and you can do it at night, and you can do it anytime, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm doing any speaking events, I will try and just um, spend 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes just preparing by doing that. It just slows things down a little bit and might, help combat any nerves I have. or any kind of sense of imposter syndrome. It just realigns or resets things. So
Yeah.
it sets you up.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to go back a little bit because I had something in my head I wanted to ask you. Did you ever suffer from anxiety and stuff when you were younger? Or did you ever?
No, I wouldn't have suffered with anxiety. I have had mental health illness for years.
Okay.
At times it would have manifested in depression, and then there were lots of other symptoms. So anxiety never would have particularly been one of my in my bag. But they're all kind of closely related. They're all cousins in a way, and they all have similar traits.
I always find, exactly. I always find when the doorbell rings, they all come in together. There's usually all family of them. They're not usually on their own.
Yeah, I have experienced a panic attack. And kind of now I would know it's not something I've had in a long, long time, and I wouldn't have a lot of experience with it. But I remember hearing a really terrific description of it. And for anyone who reads music, it's the sign. A panic attack feels like the sign of a crescendo. So it starts small and just gets wider and wider and wider, and you feel like this is going to go on forever and ever. Yeah. So if I ever start to recognize that feeling of something spiraling, and it then hits a point where you can no longer control it and it might feel overwhelming.
Yeah,
that's when I lock down. So it might be feet on the floor, socks off, we need to ground, and back against the wall. So just start to really ground yourself, come back into your body, and I remind myself of what I know. I know my breath. I know how to slow things down. So that's what I'm going to do. So if I ever do feel even the beginnings of those feelings, that's where I try to place myself, whether it's lying down, whether it's sitting down, but I will usually come back to my breath.
Yeah, that's really good. I really like that. Yeah, no, I had something, it was in my head the whole time. I just wanted to ask you about that. And look, we'll wrap this up fairly soon. Before I give you the final say, I forgot to ask you that question. I must write this down and tell people I'm going to ask them a question. But I just wanted to ask you, when you're doing your free diving and you're doing the discipline where it's, the one that's straight down, which one did you say that was? Say it's the one with the rope or whatever.
Yeah, free immersion.
Yeah. When you're doing that, like, obviously, and I'm sure there's a fine line between, when you're doing your breathing and you're ready to go down. So obviously there's a fine line between probably, going unconscious like you did before, maybe. But when you're actually going down, what are your thoughts like? I mean, I suppose you have to try and clear your head of all thoughts. I mean, because that would use oxygen, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, a good dive, I think of very little.
Okay.
A good dive, I kind of break it into 3 sections. The first part, you're using quite a bit of energy to overcome positive buoyancy. So you need to get down there, you need a bit of effort. Okay. I usually use a song. I do sing a lot anyway. I teach singing, and there's always some really irritating earworm in my brain for the day. I often use a song that will help me set a rhythm. So like that, kind of like you were talking about with your own earphones, it gives me something to hook my mind onto. Okay. Now, it's nothing very profound. There was a time where every time I started a dive, all I could hear was, "What should we do with the drunken sailor? It's nothing highbrow. I don't know why that song came into my head, but essentially it helped create that rhythm of pulling down the rope. And I think actually that's why that song was used in the first place.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Like the sea shanty.
Yeah.
So that was the first part. So it always it makes me smile as well, at how ridiculous this is. I'm training for a competition singing "What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor?" Typical Irish woman. So pulling down on the rope, just gives me something to focus on.
Okay.
And then when things open up, and what I mean by that is the intensity of how hard you're pulling lessens, and you start to go into free fall a little bit. And so the frequency of the pulls will fall back. And that's when things become that little bit softer. I usually then do a little bit of a body scan, just check, are my toes relaxed, are my ankles relaxed, and then work my way up. And then at that stage, I'll have gone into free fall, which means I don't have to do anything to sink.
Okay.
And that's a really magical phase. And if it goes right, if you can manage that switch off, it's really incredible. And I think that's the part of diving that has all us people that are now in their apartments thinking about their next dive. That's what is coming back. It's really, really magical. But you learn a lot about yourself in free diving, and one of the biggest parts for me is just mental resilience, knowing how to start to channel those bad thoughts or negative thoughts or whatever you want to call them, and how not to let them spiral and become anything bigger than they already are.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose that can be said, isn't it, for your day-to-day life, and isn't it, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, how many beats per minute would your heart be at when you're doing your free dive?
I don't know the honest answer, because we can't wear, obviously we're underwater, so we can't wear anything that might measure it.
Right, okay. I was just curious.
I know I can dry. I can bring it down to in the 30s.
Okay, right.
But I presume with water it's going to go lower.
Yeah, okay. I was just right. You can come back to me on that. I was just curious. Right, let's wrap this up, Claire. Where can people get in touch? Because you give courses and classes, don't you? So let's give your website a bit of a plug.
Yeah, so I'm in the process of updating my website. It needs a bit of an overhaul, but mostly it can be found on Instagram at Claire Walsh Life. And that's usually where I have my most up-to-date information.
Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. And this question, let's get to it. As soon as you've got a clue what I'm going to ask.
No, I don't. Terrified.
No, because I was on a podcast the other day and someone asked me the question and I was like, Jesus, like I'm good at asking the question, but I'm terrible at answering the question. It's basically
I'm ready. Go.
What age are you? No, it's do you have any kind of words of wisdom that you like to tell people, or is there anything that you want to say before we go? And if not, it doesn't matter. So I forgot to tell you I was going to ask you.
That is the hardest question.
It is, isn't it?
The world.
I know, it's a shocker, isn't it?
Mother of God. And now that's all that's coming into my head is, what shall we do with the drunken sailor?
Well,
No, well, do you know what? Like, I have loads of mantras. It really depends on kind of what's happening for me at the moment. And I think I'll go back to what I said earlier on is, I have the right to change lanes. I think we get very stuck on, I am a freediver, I am a puppeteer, I am a mother, I am a whatever it might be. And that might, whether that defines us or limits us or whatever, it can be very hard then to just try something else. And for me, that's where imposter syndrome comes in big time. So much so that it might stop me trying. So that's something, like I said, it just gives me permission. I'm just changing lanes. I can see a connection between this and what I used to do, and no one else needs to. Brilliant. So for me, all the bits of work I've done, whether that's puppetry, breath work, singing, gospel choir, they have a through line in them. It just mightn't be very obvious to the outside. And breath, it usually comes back to breath. And if I'm changing lanes, that's okay. I'm just having a play. I'm just exploring. I don't need to be the best. I might not be the worst. I can just play and explore. So
yeah, I absolutely love that. I really, really love that. But listen, it actually really resonates with me. I don't care about anyone else. I really like that one.
And then failing that, what shall you do with the drunken sailor?
I'm actually going to edit out the other bit, and I'm just going to leave that bit in. I won't. Right, guys, we're going to leave that there. Listen, Claire, thanks very much for coming on. That was really, really good, because especially the breathing part, I'm terrible at kind of the mindfulness and stuff like that. So, I mean, I really wanted to get some good tips off you. So that was really, really good. And thanks very much for coming on. It was brilliant.
Super, thank you.
Brilliant. Right, guys, we'll leave that there. I'll be back again very soon with another episode of the Endless Spiral podcast. I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.